Welcome to our class. We will continue with the surface plane, element number 5, and look at typography and some content development principles. So here again, we're at the surface plane where we're developing our finished product. So at the surface plane, the content, functionality, and aesthetics come together. So we'll be focusing on the content. Good design portrays content. We have looked at the principles of design. We have looked at the elements of design, and now we are looking at the last element of design, type. Typography, the work of producing printed pages from written material. The style, arrangement of, or appearance of printed text, essentially. So for our purposes, how the letters, sentences, and paragraphs will work. Typography is involved in probably every product. Some terminology. The typeface of the type you're using refers to the family of fonts. The font is actually a weight or a style within a typeface. We use these words interchangeably. We use the word font and typeface, or we just talk about fonts. Just to let you know, there is a shade of difference. So the classifications of a typeface. Serif, meaning it has these little curly things. Sans serif means it doesn't. Slab serif, it's a little bit of a wider serif. Script, it's more like a written. Ornamental, black letter, and monospace. So these are your basic classifications of a typeface. And by the way, sans serif looks better on a computer screen. Serif has been traditionally used for print. So here we see the letter M in a sans serif, no curly cues in a serif. The slab serif, a little fatter and a little bit more less curly, but still there are the serifs. Script, more like a writing. Black letter, more Gothic looking. Monospace, here there's a different classification, handwritten, and decorative. So sometimes you might see different classifications with respect to different typefaces. Alright, here again, just for your own information, and typography in itself is another area. In every individual letter we have ascenders, descenders, we have these arms, we have what's called a counter, there's our little serifs, we have a stem, we have strokes, we have the height, and we have the X height, or essentially the X height and the cap height. Another basic is alignment. By default, everything is left aligned. That's how we read from left to right. You can also center or right align text, which is usually good for headings or captions. It's not good for a paragraph. You can also justify, where we have a straight edge on both the right and the left. So this is an example of left alignment, center alignment, or right alignment. Right alignment is generally used in books and magazines, on business cards. Center alignment, here again, headings or titles. You know that someone is not professional if all their paragraphs are centered. The weight. The weight refers to essentially the lightness or the boldness. So you might see weights with respect to a font or a font. When you're creating paragraphs, there is a measurement that you might want to adhere to. For example, how many lines of text do you want in a paragraph or columns? What do you want the width to be? Here again, this can be crucial to the readability. Here again, if you can't convey your message, if you can't attract the user, then you didn't accomplish your goals. Leading or letting. the amount of space between lines, also referred to as line height. So if you look at these two paragraphs, which one is more appealing to the user? Obviously the one on the left, due to the line height, due to the spacing between the text also. It's more readable. Some other terms that you may come across these in Photoshop or Illustrator. Kerning, the adjustment of space between the individual characters. Sometimes we just want to put a little bit more space between certain characters for emphasis or just for plain readability purposes. Tracking is the spacing of a group of characters. They all might have the same tracking. Glyphs are the other characters that a font might have. Letters to numbers and other kinds of special characters or symbols. Okay, the term rag. This has to do with the uneven vertical edge, which is very typical and normal on the right-hand column. The left always lines up. Here again, you might want to adjust your width to eliminate excess rag. So which paragraph looks better? The one on the right looks better. So this is where our width comes in handy, and the amount of words in sentences. Okay, some other terminology that you might come across, and it's not a bad idea to recognize these, because here again you want to adjust your widths so that this doesn't occur. A widow. A widow is essentially when one word is all by itself on a line, unprofessional looking. An orphan is essentially when one word is separated from the rest of the paragraph. All right, so here's the orphan at the top of the column, and it really belongs to this column over here. Here's the widow is on the bottom, belongs to what's on top of it. So when developing your content, here again, you want to make sure that to the best of your ability you are compensating for this happening. Some problems that people generally have with respect to hyphens, an M dash and an N dash, and you may not even know what an M dash and N dash are. These little lines. A hyphen is used to divide words. All right, that might break. And you generally don't see that happening a lot in today's world because of the word processor. We generally keep words together, or phrases together. But you can hyphenate words. An M dash is used to indicate a break in thought, and this is the longest of the line. So here's an example of a break in thought. An N dash is used for ranges of values. For example, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., a range. Monday through Friday, a range. Ages 5 through 8, a range. So make sure that you're using the correct characters in the correct places. Here again, when it comes to conveying content to the user and the user's impression, if the user sees poor grammar, poor syntax, they're not going to think very highly of your company or your product. Typography can be just as powerful, if not more powerful, as the other design elements. It can be used to draw attention, to create importance or hierarchy, to create contrast and unity, to convey feeling and emotion, to establish your brand and communicate your identity. Sometimes combining typefaces, different typefaces, works very well. Sometimes just varying the weight of typefaces works well to communicate the different effects that we just talked about. Varying the style and styes and varying the colors or textures. So these are different ways that we can use our typography to communicate different messages to the user. Alright, so here we have an example of how typography can be used to contrast. And by using different weights in the same typeface, we can create a good contrast. So here we see the different weights. So it can create a hierarchy, it can create levels of importance. Here's an example Another example of different weights in the same typeface. Creating contrast and bringing out a message, the important words, polar climate, data visualization, sonification. A little bit more effective than if the whole caption there was in the same weight. Here's different weights in the same typeface. Here again, bringing attention, cueing in the user, and building a hierarchy of importance. Here we see an example of contrast using different typeface categories. Now this is where you need to be a little bit careful. Here we have Garmin working fine with this typeface. Notice that this is definitely sans serif and this is serif. And here we have two typefaces that don't work well together because they're both serif. Generally, opposites work well. Alright, so that being said, opposites, very different works well, or very similar works well. So you want to choose one or two typefaces. And you want to determine what typeface will be used for headings, what typeface will be used for content. And you want to have consistency throughout your product. So here we see similar typefaces that are working well. And here we have different typefaces that also work well. Typography can be used to create contrast by varying the size. So here we have different size for the main title. We have some headings, different size, also different colors. And here we have our paragraphs. Notice the way that the developer aligned these paragraphs. Here this was right aligned and the rag is on the left. Here this is left aligned and the rag is on the right. Notice we have balance, we have symmetry. And they're varying the typeface, the weight, the size, and the color to draw attention to the user to portray the content. Typography can be a very powerful tool when it comes to portraying the content and creating a very powerful message for the user. Typography is sometimes used for what is called a drop cap. Here again, this is pretty much a desktop publishing technique. You wouldn't see this on a website, but this is what's called a drop cap. This large letter here and different front lines. You see this on newsletters a lot. Okay, so here again, typography can be used to create a hierarchy of different levels of importance of your content by varying size, weight, color, how it's organized, the adjacency, the closeness, the distance of the type. So looking at size, weight, color, texture, organization. In our kettle potato chip, what catches the eye first? Well, kettle. Look at the typeface. It's very custom. Also has some texture and color to it. The weight and the size supersedes everything else. We also have some hierarchy with respect to the rest of the information. Changing case. And we have some lines here separating and drawing attention and unifying different content. So here we have two packages of licorice. On the left, here's tire tread licorice. Notice how the type is used. It creates a hierarchy. We have 3 levels. Look at the tire tread. The type actually is laid out to look like a tire tread, to look like the licorice. So we have the design is blending in with the meaning of the content, even the word licorice. Notice how they did the type So we're conveying meaning of the product in the typography. Over here, the word licorice also catches the attention first. Notice the typography, notice the contrast, the black and the white. Notice the lines with direction. Here we have twists, we have the actual product twisting up. We also have some shapes going on here. So notice how our design principles are being used to communicate to the user. Okay, color, size, and placement of the type helps in establishing hierarchy and organization. So this is from a website. Here's their title and their tagline. Notice the content. Notice the color and the size. Here we have 3 different sections. Notice the separation with the white space. Notice the unity. Same color, same size, and the paragraphs. So we're looking at type, how it organizes each section. It creates a hierarchy. It lets us know where the title is. It lets us know the overall idea to be found here. All right, so when you're developing a product that contains a lot of content, you want to make sure that you have consistency and uniformity throughout. Some other uses of type in these 2 wine bottles, and I'm going to go through them in the next couple slides. Alright, so here's the rojo mojo. Notice how they're joining the 2 words with type. They're aligning everything up, the O's, alright? So we have a very minimalistic sans serif font, very simple, although we do have a very strong contrast. We have our white on red, and notice we do have some black here, but that's not really that visible, but it's there also, and then a second level of contrast coming in here. But notice how well, if you start looking at people's logos are very creative, how they adjust the type. So here is our other wine bottle, where the brand Tamare, and notice over here we have 2 overlapping T's, just a little play on the T to grab your attention, to reinforce the product name. The product begins with a T. All right, we also have some different alignments. We have some vertical and horizontal alignments, and we also have a mix of several different typefaces. Here we have a serif font. Here we have a sans serif down here. Notice how well they work. Color can be a very powerful tool used in typography, obviously for contrast, organization, hierarchy, emotion, mood, also audience identification. Who's the audience? The user. So here on the right we have our popular science, and obviously our yellow pops out at us. Then we have another color here, which is a little bit smaller, different, more of an italic. Looks like it's the same typeface but a different shape. Notice how they alternate the different colors to make it easier to read, easier to see at a glance. And here we have color behind the other important items that the business wants you to focus on. Shape, shape, shape. And notice that even though we have images, they do not take away at all from the content. Okay, this is a poster. Kind of probably about global warming. And we're looking at color. The color that you choose can be dictated by the content, the subject matter, your goals and objectives, and the user also. So sometimes, as we saw with the licorice, your choice of color might be based on the product itself, the message you want to communicate, the goals. So here again, it's about global warming. It's about melting the surface. Notice it's blue, shades of blue, ice. Notice here we have surface melting. Notice that the words are actually melting. Here where they're talking about sea level rises, notice it's actually rising. Ice moves and behaves. Look at how they're arranging the type. The type is actually doing what it says. It's communicating the message. The word cracks. Look at the typography with cracks in it. Expanding. Look at the kerning in between these letters so that it's expanding. So we're communicating a message with typography violently. Very attentive. Okay, here again, use of typography to organize and relate the content. This is a table of contents, Wired magazine. All right, notice the word contents is in red. Here's our numbers in red. We have some uniformity here. All right, we're organizing different areas here with our captions, larger type. Contrast of type on an image. Here again, we have an image. It does not take away from our ability to read the type. So our choices, our size and colors must be chosen so to accomplish the goals so that we can still communicate our message. Another example of typography on an image, and in this case we have our image faded out a little bit. And we actually have it darkened a little bit so that our white type shows up nicely. Another example of typography on an image, and in this case we're putting our typography right on top of the shape and overlaying on top of the image should we wish to preserve our image. Very good effect. Very useful. Alright, some rules for combining typefaces. Alright, so we're looking at one typeface with a large number of variations. That always works good. Sticking to the same typeface and just varying it based on the situation. Using multiple typefaces if you would like to have some contrast. So for headlines, work best with sans serif with a variety of bolds and something else in the body. So generally when you use multiples, your headlines and your titles are in one typeface, everything else is in the body's basic content. Alright, using typefaces with similar features works well, or typefaces from similar periods will also work well. Using typefaces from the same designer works well. Sometimes opposites work very well. Typefaces with similar body height works well. If you're using 3 typefaces, these are generally good categories. And here we have an example of 3 paragraphs with 3 different typefaces, and it seems to work well together. Alright, so here we have a website, and we have these classic typefaces, 2 different ones, okay, but they're both similar, they're classic, and here again it accentuates the product. It communicates a message to the user. All right, these are handcrafted, these are quality, these are traditional. Another use of typography from a website, combining two different typefaces for a modern and casual style. So here we have a typeface up here for our navigation, and we have different typeface for our headings and our body copy. Another example of a website that uses a single typeface, but here again varies the styles and colors. This is all the same typeface, but by varying the styles and colors, we create unity, contrast, and interest for the user. A very nice URL where you can find typefaces that under different categories to create different moods, even for holidays, etc.